Today, we're tackling a really critical mission. We've got source material here detailing one of the most, well, frankly, unprecedented political leaks I can remember seeing recently.
Really is something else.
Yeah, it involves a top White House official, an encrypted app everyone thought was safe, and talk about deploying elite U.S. troops on American soil.
Right.
This is basically your shortcut to understanding how operational strategy and, high-stakes political risk sometimes collide very publicly.
It's quite the set of documents. It almost reads like a thriller, doesn't it? You've got Anthony Salisbury, a senior White House official, using Signal, the encrypted messaging app, believing it's secure.
Right, secure.
But somehow, his private chats about moving troops get photographed and then published by the Minnesota Star Tribune for everyone to see.
Okay, let's unpack this. The first thing that just, jumps out at me is the vulnerability. How incredibly vulnerable this whole thing was.
Exactly.
This wasn't some sophisticated cyber attack
Right.
or, foreign spying.
No, not at all. It was simple proximity. Astonishingly simple. Salisbury, his deputy Homeland Security advisor, a top deputy to Stephen Miller. He was in Minnesota.
Okay.
Attending a family funeral, actually. So dealing with personal stuff.
Right, a difficult time personally.
And while he's there, someone photographs him using his phone in public, screen visible, showing these, sensitive political discussions.
Oh, wow. Wow. That's a staggering lapse in, basic operational security, personal OPSEC.
It really is an
Yeah.
astonishing breakdown.
And the content of that conversation, that's what makes it so explosive, isn't it? Who is he actually talking to, exchanging these kinds of details with outside of secure government channels?
He was messaging Patrick Weaver. Weaver is a senior aide to the defense secretary at the time, Pete Hegseth.
So you've got a direct line here. White House to Pentagon. High-level policy talk about deploying troops, but completely bypassing the secure, established military communication systems. They're using a commercial app instead.
That's the picture, yes.
Yeah. Now, when this story broke, the White House had to respond, obviously. Abigail Jackson, the spokesperson, she defended Salisbury, said, look, he was grieving, but he continued his important work. And the key line from their defense was that the messages weren't actually new or classified information.
And that defense, well, it immediately brings up a big question for you listening. If it wasn't classified, if it wasn't sensitive military intel, then why the need for Signal?
Yeah.
Why use an encrypted app like that? Doesn't using that channel basically confirm they knew they were bypassing secure routes?
Yeah.
Precisely because the political content was so risky.
Absolutely. It implies the information was, let's say, politically radioactive, even if it didn't have a top secret stamp on it.
Exactly. Radioactive is a good word for it.
And the core discussion revealed in those photos, it was about potentially deploying the U.S. Army's 82nd Airborne Division to Portland, Oregon.
Right. And we should probably take a moment here just to explain the weight of that particular choice.
Yeah.
The 82nd Airborne. This isn't just any unit.
Yep.
This is the Rapid Reaction Force, a really storied unit. They're known for being the first boots on the ground in conflicts all over the world.
You're talking World War II, Vietnam, Afghanistan.
The Kabul withdrawal in 2021, a hugely complex operation. This is a combat-focused force primarily deployed overseas.
So when you look at that history, sending the 82nd, an active duty combat unit, into an American city, that just escalates things massively. It stops being just law enforcement, becomes a domestic military deployment.
And there are huge legal and political tripwires there. You've got the Posse Comitatus Act, restricting active duty troops on U.S. soil. It's why the National Guard is almost always preferred for domestic situations. They operate under state control, usually.
Unless federalized, yeah. It's a much less controversial option.
Vastly preferred. And that context really explains the hesitation we saw coming from the Defense Secretary's office, from Hegseth.
Right. The leaked messages showed Hegseth, through Weaver, clearly preferred using the National Guard, not the 82nd.
Yes. The defense leadership, they understood the political dynamite involved here, the liability.
And Weaver was blunt about that political cost, wasn't he? He warned specifically about the media reaction, the public fallout.
He did. He said quite plainly that deploying the 82nd Airborne would, quote, cause a lot of headlines.
Cause a lot of headlines. Oh, that phrase just sums it all up, doesn't it? That tightrope walk between military options and managing public perception.
It really does.
Yeah.
And if you follow the thread of that conversation in the leak, this is where it shifts. It goes from operational talk to, frankly, political survival.
How so?
Well, Weaver notes that Hegseth wanted President Trump's explicit authorization before doing anything controversial with troops.
Explicit authorization. That sounds, well, it sounds like more than just standard procedure, the usual chain of command request. Why was the defense secretary pushing so hard for the president's personal sign-off here?
It was absolutely about managing strategic risk, political risk. The source material actually captures the calculation perfectly. Weaver says, quote, "Between you and I think Pete just wants the top cover from the boss if anything goes sideways with the troops there."
Top cover from the boss.
That phrase is just fascinating. It's so revealing.
Isn't it?
It means the defense secretary wasn't just looking for approval. He was making sure the president would personally take the heat, the political fallout, the accountability.
Exactly.
If deploying troops led to violence or bad press or made the protests worse, it suggests political safety was maybe the main driver, more than even the military need itself.
I think that's a fair reading. When you're talking about sending a unit known for fighting overseas onto American streets, the military logic gets swallowed by the political reality very quickly.
So Hegseth wanted the president owning the outcome, explicitly, to shield the Defense Department from having to manage that potential PR crisis alone.
That seems to be the clear implication, yes. Protect the institution.
And the political context at the time, it was incredibly charged. President Trump was hammering Portland, calling the Democratic-run city war-ravaged, focusing on the anti-IC protests happening there.
Right, the rhetoric was intense. And critics were already shouting from the rooftops saying, look, sending in active duty troops, it's going to look like an occupation. It will absolutely trigger a backlash and probably escalate the whole situation.
A very real concern. And ultimately, the action that was announced publicly seemed to reflect that concern, that preference from the secretary for minimizing risk.
Right. The immediate deployment they announced was 200 National Guard members, which is a stark contrast to the private talk about the 82nd Airborne.
A very different scale and type of deployment.
But, even that safer option wasn't exactly smooth sailing, was it? There seems to be another layer of communication breakdown here, too.
How do you mean?
Well, President Trump later went out and claimed the National Guard was now in place. But local news reports were saying, hold on, the deployment hasn't actually happened yet.
Right. So even the less controversial plan had immediate messaging problems.
Yeah.
Execution discrepancies.
Yeah. Which maybe brings us to the bigger picture here. The more systemic issue that the sources connect this leak to, this signal photo incident. It wasn't a one-off, was it? It was part of a recurring pattern, a pattern of high-profile leaks within that administration, all involving senior people using encrypted apps for sensitive official business.
That's a crucial point. This wasn't an anomaly. It fits into a broader context of, let's call it, communication insecurity.
It really makes you wonder about the culture around digital communication at that level. Is convenience just consistently trumping security? What other examples do we have that show how maybe ingrained this digital carelessness was?
Oh, there are a couple of precedents that are just jaw-dropping. Frankly, they make the Portland leak seem almost predictable, less like an accident, more like an inevitable outcome.
Okay.
The first one was back in March of that year. It involved discussions about planning sensitive military strikes in Yemen.
Okay, planning active military strikes on a commercial app. That sounds like Security 101, rule number 1 broken.
It gets much, much worse. Yeah. The editor-in-chief of the Atlantic magazine.
The editor.
Yes. Was mistakenly added to a Signal group chat. Yes. A chat where senior aides, including Hegseth again, and Vice President J.D. Vance, were actively discussing the logistics of these Yemen strikes.
You're kidding. How does that even happen? Adding a major journalist to his secret military planning chat?
It's almost impossible to fathom the sequence of errors required, but it happened. That's an administrative failure, a security failure of just the highest order.
I mean, that's beyond cartoonish. How do you confuse a senior government or military official with a prominent editor? It just shows a complete collapse of what you might call context control in those chat groups.
Total collapse. And then the second example. A month later, in April, it involves Hegseth again and those same Yemen strikes.
Okay, what now?
It came out that he had shared classified details about the Yemen operations with his family member.
With family?
Using another encrypted group chat.
Wow, okay. So let's recap this pattern. We have a major journalist accidentally looped into secret military strike planning. We have the defense secretary sharing classified details of those same strikes with family. And now, the Portland deployment discussion, potentially involving the 82nd Airborne, photographed on Signal in public.
3 separate, incredibly high-profile security disasters.
All linked to the same administration. all linked to using supposedly secure commercial apps like Signal for government business. What does this pattern tell us, fundamentally, about their decision-making process, about their priorities?
Well, I think this pattern tells us that, for whatever reason, senior officials consistently decided the speed, the informality, the, let's say, perceived convenience of these apps.
Yeah, the immediacy.
Was worth the extraordinary risk. They chose it over secure, established military and government channels. And the main threat, interestingly, wasn't some sophisticated foreign hack. It was simple human error, user error, what some people call context collapse.
Context collapse, meaning?
Mixing personal devices, public spaces, different groups of people, and highly sensitive state secrets all together. It's bound to break down somewhere. And when you're discussing something as charged as activating an elite unit like the 82nd Airborne for domestic political reasons, choosing to risk a leak like this, it just fundamentally undermines public trust. It undermines operational integrity.
Right. So pulling this all together from our deep dive today, we've looked at that immediate tension, that choice, combat-ready 82nd Airborne versus the National Guard for Portland. We explored why the Defense Secretary felt it was critical to get that explicit presidential authorization, that top cover, purely to manage the political liability.
The key political calculation.
And then we connected the single incident to that wider, really alarming pattern of digital sloppiness, how these encrypted apps were being used or maybe misused at the highest levels.
It paints a very clear picture, I think, a picture of these pressure points where political needs, media management, that fear of headlines, it starts to override established military protocols. It overrides basic security sense.
They knew deploying the 82nd would be a PR nightmare.
And that fear seems to have shaped every communication choice that followed, including the choice of how to communicate.
So we want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought building on all this. When you consider these huge risks, this proven pattern of security failures, what does it really tell you about the state of governance when a primary concern for a top cabinet official getting that top cover is so explicitly about managing political risk, maybe even more than ensuring the flawless execution of strategy? What are the ultimate priorities when political safety seems to dictate the communication methods for potential military action?
It's a critical question to ponder. Where does politics end and sound strategy begin, especially when the lines get blurred by insecure communication?
Definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.